The void between stars was not empty. It was filled with laws, the most sacred of these, etched into the foundational charters of the Stellar Concordat, was the Pact of Non-Interference. It was a law born from 1,000,000,000 years of observation, a conclusion reached by civilizations so ancient their names were fossilized in cosmic dust. The universe demanded balance. Species rose, species fell, stars were born, stars died. To intervene was to challenge the natural, brutal, and elegant calculus of existence itself. The Concordat did not rule the galaxy. It curated it, acting as silent, dispassionate gardeners, pruning the ambitions of any species that dared to play God. They were the shepherds of cosmic law, and their silence was more profound than any threat. For centuries, this peace, a sterile and cold thing, had held. Then, humanity remembered how to scream. The cry came from the Cygnan expanse, a sector quarantined by Concordat decree nearly a century ago. The Cygnans were not a species of flesh and blood, but of living crystal, sentient geologies that communicated in symphonies of polarized light. Their cities were breathtaking, crystalline structures that sang in harmony with their star, and their consciousness was a collective, woven into the very fabric of their world. But a blight had come for them, a phenomenon the Concordat's astropathologists had termed correlated inorganic decay, or more simply, the Gray Blight. It was a nanite plague, moving like a slow, inexorable tide, breaking down complex inorganic matter into a uniform, useless, gray sludge. It was, the Concordat declared, a natural event, a form of galactic entropy, tragic but necessary. To interfere would be to disrupt the grand cycle. So, they drew a line, declared the sector forbidden, and turned their countless eyes away, leaving the Cygnans to face their quiet, orderly extinction. The Concordat recorded the final light songs of the Cygnan civilization for their archives, artifacts of a fate deemed inevitable. They did not expect a response. On the galactic rim, in a cluster of turbulent, resource-rich systems known as the Terran Reach, Captain Eva Rostova stood on the observation deck of the survey vessel Pathfinder. Her ship was an ugly, beautiful thing, a testament to humanity's philosophy of pragmatic evolution. It had been built as a long-range geological surveyor, but decades of service on the fringe had layered it with salvage tech, unauthorized modifications, and experimental systems that would give a Concordat engineer a terminal aneurysm. Its hull was a patchwork of scars, each one a story Rostova knew by heart. Like her ship, she was a product of the fringe practical, weathered, and possessing a deep-seated skepticism for laws written by people who never had to watch a world die up close. Humanity had been denied full Concordat membership 3 centuries prior, cited for their emotional volatility and chaotic sociological patterns. They were deemed too unpredictable, too prone to acting on sentiment rather than logic, so they were relegated to the Reach, tolerated as useful barbarians who managed the wild outer territories the Concordat couldn't be bothered with. For 3 years, the Pathfinder had been charting the Icarus Void, a treacherous expanse of dark matter and rogue singularities bordering the quarantine Cygnan sector. It was a lonely, thankless job, pushing the boundaries of known space 1 light year at a time. It was during a routine deep field scan that the anomaly appeared. It wasn't a signal in any conventional sense, no radio waves, no subspace chatter. It was a ghost in the machine, a structured pattern of neutrinos bleeding through the void, a whisper that bypassed their comms array and manifested directly on the main science console. The duty officer, a young ensign named Wren, called her to the bridge, his face pale. "Captain," he said, his voice hushed. "The long-range gravimetric array is singing." On the screen, the data wasn't just data. It was art. It was a mathematical sonata, a complex, heartbreakingly beautiful sequence of light patterns translated into sound by the ship's computer. It was the last symphony of the Cygnans. Rostova listened, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. The song was a lament, a farewell, but woven deep within its cascading harmonies was something else, a data packet of impossible density. It was their entire civilization distilled into a single, desperate message: their history, their science, their philosophy, and, impossibly, a theoretical blueprint for a counter-agent to the Gray Blight. They had solved the equation to their own extinction, but lacked the mobile but organic-based industrial infrastructure to build the solutions. They were geological life, and the cure required biological synthesis. They couldn't save themselves, so they had hurled their soul into the void, a message in a bottle for anyone who might be listening. Silence descended on the bridge as the final notes faded, leaving only the low hum of the life support system. Rostova's first officer, a stern, by-the-book man named Marcus Thorne, was the first to speak. "We delete it," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "We scrub the sensor logs, classify the event as a sensor ghost, and we lay in a new course, away from this sector. That is the only logical course of action." Logical. The voice belonged to Anya Sharma, the Pathfinder's chief engineer, who had emerged from the engine room, her face smudged with grease and her eyes blazing. "We've just been handed the library of a dying species, including a potential way to save them, and your first instinct is to burn the book." "That's not logic, Marcus. That's cowardice." "It's the law, Anya," Thorne retorted, his jaw tight. "The pact of non-interference is the foundation of interstellar stability. The Concordat quarantined this sector for a reason. Violating it isn't just a crime, it's an act of war. They would impound the Pathfinder, strip this crew of their ranks, and leave humanity to pay the political price for generations. For what a species the Concordat has already written off." The bridge crew watched the exchange, their faces a mixture of fear and conflicted duty. They were Terrans, raised on stories of humanity's own near misses with extinction plagues, asteroid impacts, self-inflicted nuclear winters. The instinct to intervene, to help, was woven into their DNA as deeply as the instinct to survive. But the Concordat was an empire of rules, and its retribution was famously patient and absolute. Rostova turned her back on them, looking out at the starfield, at the faint, hazy smudge of the Cygnan expanse. She thought of the quarantine line, an imaginary boundary drawn in the void by a council that debated the morality of extinction from the safety of pristine orbital habitats. She thought of the singing crystals, their light dimming, their civilization turning to dust while the galaxy pretended not to notice. Her decision felt less like a choice and more like a chemical reaction, an inevitable consequence of being human. "We're not going to fight the Blight," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the unyielding weight of command. The crew turned to her. "We're not going to start a war, but we are not going to be the ones who stood by and held the recording device while a soul burned out." That light song contained a location, an orbital sanctuary holding something called the Seed Crystal, the core of their collective consciousness, their last legacy. Thorne stepped forward. "Eva, you can't be serious." "A retrieval mission. Across the quarantine line, our drives will leave a signature a blind man could read from halfway across the sector." "Not our standard drives." Rostova said, a dangerous glint in her eye. She turned to her engineer. Anya, how stable is the phase folder? Sharma's eyes widened. Then a slow, reckless grin spread across her face. The phase folding drive was the Pathfinder's dirtiest secret, an experimental piece of Terran tech that didn't tear a hole in space-time like a normal jump drive, but briefly and violently folded it, creating a momentary, untraceable wormhole for instantaneous transit. It was also notoriously unstable, with a 50-50 chance of either working perfectly or atomizing the ship. It's a bomb wrapped in a prayer, Captain, Anya said with relish. But I think I can get us one clean fold in and one fold out. Maybe. That's our window, Rostova declared, her gaze sweeping across the bridge. We fold in, retrieve the seed crystal with remote drones, and we fold out before the Concordat even knows we were there. We save their memory, their essence. We save what we can. She looked directly at Thorn. This isn't about defying the Concordat. It's about upholding our own humanity. Any crew member who objects may transfer their command codes to the secondary bridge. No questions asked. Not a single person moved. The silence was their answer. Rostova gave a grim, sharp nod. Anya, get your bomb ready. Marcus, plot the fold coordinates. Ren, prepare the retrieval drones. We're going in. The jump was nauseating. A sensation of being turned inside out and reassembled incorrectly. For a timeless second, the universe dissolved into a smear of screaming light and color. And then, with a jarring lurch, they were there. The view from the main screen was apocalyptic. The Signan expanse was a graveyard. The space around them was thick with a shimmering gray haze, the dust of consumed asteroids and moons. In the distance, the Signan homeworld, once a vibrant, crystalline jewel, was a diseased, crumbling sphere. Huge swaths of its surface were a dull, lifeless gray, the nanite blight visibly crawling across the remaining crystalline continents, extinguishing their light. The ship's external sensors screamed with proximity alerts. The dust wasn't just dust. It was active, a microscopic sea of dormant nanites. There, Thorn said, his voice strained. The sanctuary. It was a delicate, web-like orbital station, its crystalline arms already showing the telltale signs of decay. Power flickered across its surface, and it was venting atmosphere in silent, glittering plumes. It's failing. We don't have much time. Launch the drones, Rostova commanded, her heart pounding against her ribs. Hey. On screen, two sleek retrieval drones shot from the Pathfinder's belly, weaving through the debris field towards the dying sanctuary. The operation was surgically precise. The drones sliced through a weakened section of the outer hull and navigated the darkened, crumbling corridors, their lights cutting through the gloom. They found the seed crystal in the sanctuary's central chamber, a magnificent, multifaceted crystal nearly 2 meters tall, glowing with a soft, internal light and emitting a low, resonant hum, a single, defiant note in a symphony of decay. As the drone's manipulator arms closed around the crystal, a new alarm blared on the bridge. Captain, Ren shouted, the blight, it's reacting. Outside. The gray dust cloud was no longer inert. It coalesced, forming into shimmering, metallic tendrils that whipped through the void, lashing out towards the Pathfinder. It was intelligent. It knew they were there, and it recognized them as a threat. It's a defense response, Rostova breathed, horrified. It's not just a plague, it's a predator. Tendrils slammed against the Pathfinder's shields, causing the ship to shudder violently. Shields at 80%, Thorn yelled. The nanites are abrading the emitters. Drones are clear, Ren confirmed. As the two machines shot out of the collapsing sanctuary, the precious crystal secured between them. They're coming in hot. Anya, I need that drive spun up now, Rostova ordered. Working on it. The energy fluctuations from the blight are playing hell with the focusing coils. The engineer yelled back over the comm. A massive tendril, thicker than the Pathfinder itself, slammed into the ship's port side. The lights flickered, and a shower of sparks erupted from a nearby console. Shields are gone. We have a hull breach on Deck 4. The drone slammed into the cargo bay, just as the blast doors were groaning shut. We have the crystal, Ren yelled. Anya, Rostova screamed. Now came the reply. With a gut-wrenching roar, the phase-folding drive engaged. The universe twisted again, and the nightmarish view of the gray blight and the dying world vanished, replaced by the familiar, comforting star patterns of the Icarus void. The bridge was filled with the sounds of panting breaths and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. They had done it. They had gotten away with it. But as the damage control team scrambled to assess the ship, a small, almost imperceptible icon blinked on Anya Sharma's engineering console. It was a microscopic foreign agent analysis, triggered automatically by a breach. A tiny, infinitesimal amount of the gray blight, no more than a few thousand nanites, had been blasted onto the ship's hull during the final impact. They were dormant, inert from the violence of the fold, but they were there. They had brought the plague with them. Before anyone could even register the secondary threat, the primary one arrived. A klaxon wailed through the ship, the unmistakable sound of a Concordat proximity alert. Ren's head snapped up from his console, his eyes wide with fear. Captain, he whispered, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. They're Concordat Justicar-class cruisers. 5 of them. They're hailing us. On the main screen, the serene, the emotionless face of a Concordat Justicar appeared, its voice a synthesized chorus of perfect, dispassionate authority. Filled the bridge. Terran vessel Pathfinder, you have violated the Pact of Non-Interference. By order of the Stellar Concordat, you will power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Your defiance has been noted. Rostova looked from the impassive face on the screen to the cargo bay indicator, which confirmed the safe retrieval of the seed crystal. In the silence of the bridge, she could almost hear it humming, a song of hope and memory that they had risked everything for it. The weight of her decision settled upon her, as heavy and as real as the 5 warships now bracketing her vessel. She had saved a memory, but she may have just doomed her crew, her ship, and her entire species. The silence of the void had been broken, and the echo was already on its way. The synthesized voice of the Concordat Justicar hung in the airless silence of the bridge, a statement of fact, not a threat. It was the voice of a mathematical proof, cold and irrefutable. 5 Justicar-class cruisers, sleek instruments of absolute order, held the Pathfinder in a cage of overlapping targeting grids. There was no escape. Surrender was the only variable left in the equation. Eva Rostova met the emotionless gaze of the Justicar on the screen, her own face a mask of hardened resolve. Inside her, however, a storm of calculations raged. Her ship was wounded. Its experimental heart, the phase folder, was offline and bleeding energy, and somewhere on her hull, a microscopic monster was sleeping. Surrender was death, a slow, bureaucratic death in a Concordat tribunal, followed by the quiet erasure of the Signen's last hope. Justicar, Rostova said, her voice steady, broadcasting on an open channel. I am Captain Eva Rostova of the Terran Survey Vessel Pathfinder. I acknowledge your transmission as per Concordat Intercept Protocol 73A. I am required to request clarification of the alleged violation before relinquishing command. A flicker of annoyance, so subtle it was almost subliminal, crossed the Justicar's impassive features. Humans, always hiding in the thorny thicket of their own beloved bureaucracy. Marcus Thorne shot Rostova a look, a mixture of terror and grudging admiration. She was using his own argument against him, weaponizing the very laws he had preached. Your violation is self-evident, Captain. The Justicar's voice returned. Your energy signature matches a vessel that crossed the Signan quarantine perimeter 17.4 standard minutes ago. An untraceable energy spike consistent with a primitive folding drive was detected. Your presence here is the conclusion of a simple deduction. Rostova smiled, a thin, humorless expression. A deduction is not evidence. Justicar. The Icarus Void is known for its gravimetric anomalies. Our sensors are full of ghost signatures. We were responding to a distress signal when your fleet accosted us. To accuse us without a formal inquest is a violation of Concordat Fair Tribunal Act, Section Gamma. She was stalling, throwing procedural chaff into the wind, buying seconds that felt like lifetimes. On the engineering deck, Anya Sharma was practically fused with her console, sweat beading on her forehead as she bypassed fried circuits and rerouted power. The phase folder's core was hemorrhaging tachyons, and the containment field was failing. If it breached, it wouldn't just atomize the Pathfinder, it would tear a hole in the local space-time that would make the Concordat's day infinitely more complicated. Talk faster, Eva, Anya muttered under her breath, her fingers flying across the interface. This bomb is getting eager. On the bridge, the pressure was mounting. The Justicar was silent for a long moment, processing the Terran captain's infuriating adherence to protocol. Your log files will serve as sufficient evidence. Captain, transmit them now. This was it. The end of the line. Their logs were an unedited confession, but as Rostova prepared her refusal, something shifted in the ship's atmosphere. A low, resonant hum began to fill the bridge, a sound that was felt more than heard, vibrating through the deck plating and up through the soles of their boots. It was the seed crystal. In the cargo bay, the multifaceted gem was glowing brighter, its internal light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, like a heart starting to beat. Ren, the young ensign, gasped, his eyes fixed on his console. Captain, the crystal. It's interfacing with the ship's primary computer. I'm not doing it. It's just happening. Images, not data, flooded the secondary screens, crystalline cities catching the light of a binary sun. The slow, creeping dread of the gray blight, a universe of knowledge and sorrow pouring into their systems not as a message, but as a shared memory. The crew felt it, a profound sense of loss, a collective grief for a people they had never met. The experience was overwhelming, heartbreaking, and it galvanized their resolve. They were no longer just a crew on a ship. They were custodians of a soul. Rostova's eyes met Thorne's. The conflict in his face was a war in itself. But the shared grief of the Signans had tipped the scales. He gave a single, sharp nod. His loyalty was to his ship, his crew. Justicar, Rostova said, her voice now imbued with a new, unshakable purpose. My answer is no. We will not be boarded. We will not surrender our ship. And we will not relinquish our cargo. She cut the transmission. The Justicar's face vanished, replaced by the tactical display. The 5 concordant ships immediately shifted their formation, their weapon ports glowing with menacing energy. "They're powering main cannons," Thorn reported, his voice grimly professional. "Projected time to shield failure 12 seconds. Rostova turned to the helm. "Take us into the Serpent's Maw. Full burn." The helmsman stared at her as if she'd gone insane. The Serpent's Maw was a notoriously unstable region of the void, a chaotic dance of micro-singularities and gravitational tides that had crushed a dozen ships. It wasn't a place you flew into, it was a place you flew 100 light-years around. "Captain," he stammered. "Now," she commanded. The Pathfinder, scarred and bleeding, roared to life, its engine screaming in protest as it plunged towards the shimmering, distorted space of the Maw. The concordant cruisers followed, their movements more cautious, their powerful but less agile engines struggling against the unpredictable gravitational currents. "They're faster than us on a straight line," Rostova said, her hands gripping her command chair. "But they're not as nimble. Thorn, give me a gravity map. I want to see every ripple." As the Pathfinder danced on the edge of the first singularity, using its gravity to slingshot itself deeper into the chaos, a new crisis erupted. On the engineering deck, Anya saw it first. A small section of piping near the outer hull breach began to lose its metallic sheen, crumbling into a fine, gray powder. The Blight was awake. "Captain!" she yelled into the comm, her voice tight with panic. "We have active contamination. The nanites are eating the hull deck. 4 is compromised." And the news hit the bridge like a physical blow. They were in a dogfight with physics itself, and their ship was being devoured from the inside out. The gray dust began to spread, moving with a horrifying, unnatural purpose, breaking down every complex material it touched. It flowed over conduits, which sparked and died. It touched a bulkhead, which dissolved like sugar in water. It was a cancer on the ship's bones. As the Blight consumed a critical power relay, the ship's internal gravity fluctuated violently. On the bridge, Ren was thrown from his station, crying out in pain as his arm struck a console. The hum from the seed crystal intensified, and a wave of something washed over the crew. It wasn't sound or light. It was a feeling of calm, of focus, and an impossible infusion of knowledge. Rostova suddenly saw the Serpent's Maw not as a chaotic mess, but as a complex, beautiful machine. She saw the lines of force, the currents, the safe passages hidden between the waves of crushing gravity. It was Signan knowledge, the understanding of a species that thought in terms of geology and cosmic time, being fed directly into her mind. "Hard to port," she commanded, her voice distant, her eyes seeing a reality beyond the view screen. "There's a gravity eddy behind that rogue planetoid. We can ride it like a wave." The helmsman, trusting the impossible certainty in her voice, obeyed. The Pathfinder veered sharply, narrowly avoiding a gravitational shear that would have torn it in two. The pursuing Concordat ships were not so lucky. One of them, caught in the shear, was twisted and warped, its shields collapsing in a shower of cerulean light before its hull buckled under the strain, erupting into a silent, brilliant fireball. One down, but the Blight was spreading faster. It had reached the primary conduits leading to the main reactor. Anya and her team were in the corridor, firing plasma cutters to create fire breaks, trying to physically sever the infected sections from the rest of the ship. But it was like trying to stop the tide with a bucket. "It's too fast," Anya screamed. "It's going for the reactor if it gets in. It'll turn the core into a gray, inert lump, and we'll be dead in the water." the seed. Crystal pulsed again, this time with a focused intensity. The internal lights on the bridge flickered, and a schematic of the ship's power grid appeared on Rostova's command console. Highlighted in a soft blue light was a secondary plasma conduit, an old, redundant system that had been scheduled for removal a decade ago. It bypassed the infected area entirely. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. Anya Rostova relayed the information. There's an auxiliary plasma line on Deck 7. Can you reroute primary power through it? It hasn't been used in years. It might not hold the load. It has to. The chase was a desperate way, beautiful, terrifying ballet. Rostova, guided by the ancient knowledge of the Signans, called out impossible maneuvers. Thorn, using his intimate knowledge of Concordat tactics, predicted their opponent's every move, jamming their sensors at critical moments and feeding them false telemetry. They flew the Pathfinder not like a ship, but like a living thing, a fish swimming in a deadly current that only they could see. They skimmed the event horizon of a singularity so closely that time on the bridge dilated for a terrifying heartbeat. They used the focused radiation of a pulsar to blind the Concordat fleet's long-range sensors. Another cruiser, misjudging a gravitational slingshot Rostova had perfectly anticipated, was flung off course and smashed into a rogue asteroid, its demise marked by a brief, silent flash. The three remaining ships, however, were relentless. Their Justicar commander, adapting to the chaos, began to herd them, firing warning shots not to destroy the Pathfinder, but to force it into a predictable path, into a gravitational kill box. The Blight was now only meters from the main reactor's containment chamber. Anya, her face grimed with soot and her suit scorched, worked frantically to connect the old conduit. "The connection is unstable," she shouted over the roar of arcing plasma. "I can give you one power surge, Captain. After that, the whole system will fry. One is all we need," Rostova said. Her eyes locked on the tactical display. The Justicar had her. She was boxed in. Ahead of them lay a binary pair of neutron stars, their immense gravity creating a final, inescapable wall. To go left or right was to be caught by the Concordat. To go straight was to be spaghettified. But the Signan knowledge showed her a third option, a suicidal, 1 in a billion path. A point between the two stars, the Lagrange point, where their gravitational forces would momentarily, perfectly, cancel each other out. It was a needle's eye in the heart of a hurricane. "Anya," Rostova said, her voice impossibly calm. "Give me the surge. Helm, take us between the twins." The bridge crew stared at her in stunned silence. Thorn grabbed her arm. "Eva, that's suicide. The tidal forces will shred us to atoms before we even get close." "The Signans were masters of gravity," Rostova replied, her gaze unwavering. "They say it's possible. I'm trusting them." With a final, desperate prayer, Anya slammed the reroute controls home. Power surged through the Pathfinder, its engines glowing white-hot. The ship leaped forward, a tiny spear of Terran defiance aimed at the heart of creation. The Concordat ships held back, watching, assuming the fugitives had chosen a spectacular suicide over capture. As the Pathfinder approached the twin neutron stars, the ship began to groan, the hull screaming under the impossible tidal stresses. The Blight, agitated by the massive energy fields, surged forward, finally touching the outer casing of the reactor. But at that exact moment, the seed crystal unleashed its own power. A wave of pure blue energy erupted from the cargo bay, flowing throughout the ship's systems, not as power, but as a structural reinforcement field. It was a song of preservation, a crystalline shield against the violence of the cosmos. The groaning of the hull lessened. The ship held together by a force beyond Terran engineering. They hit the Lagrange point. For one perfect, silent, eternal second, the universe fell away. There was no gravity, no stress, no sound. They were in the eye of the storm. Then they were through. The ship was catapulted out the other side, flung into the uncharted depths of the Icarus void at a velocity that left the Concordat fleet a stunned, distant memory. The bridge was silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the crew. They had survived. They were free. But as the adrenaline faded, the grim reality set in. They were lost, hundreds of light years from Terran space, in a ship that was heavily damaged and actively being consumed by a nanite plague. The phase folder was a wreck. Their conventional drives were failing, and the Concordat and the rest of the galaxy now considered them enemies. Rostova looked at the tactical map, now an empty void, and then at the cargo bay camera, where the seed crystal hummed softly, its blue light a comforting presence in the gloom. They had escaped the law, but they had inherited something far heavier. They were no longer just running. They were carrying the torch for a dead civilization, with a monster on their back and a universe of enemies ahead. The real mission had just begun. The quiet of the Icarus void was a different kind of silence than the one imposed by Concordat law. Out here, it was the profound, absolute silence of being utterly and completely alone. Adrift, aboard the Pathfinder, the adrenaline of their impossible escape had curdled into the grim acid of reality. The ship was a wreck, held together by the Signan's crystalline energy field and Anya Sharma's frantic, desperate patches. They had won the battle, but the war for survival had just begun, and it was being fought meter by meter in the corroded guts of their own vessel. The gray blight was no longer a dormant contaminant. It was a tireless disease. Anya's voice over the internal comm was strained, stripped of its usual bravado. "It's learning. Ava, I've never seen anything like it. It's not just consuming indiscriminately anymore. It's targeting key systems, environmental controls, nav computer relays, the structural supports around the reactor. It's trying to cripple us, to leave us dead in the water. It's strategic." On the bridge, Rostova watched the internal schematic, the creeping gray infection, a visualization of their impending doom. But Anya was only half right. The blight wasn't just trying to cripple them, it was trying to reach the cargo bay. The seed crystal was fighting back, its resonant blue energy creating a localized containment field around its section of the ship, a shimmering barrier of order against the nanites' chaos. The blight would consume a plate of the hull, and the crystal's energy would subtly restructure the remaining alloy, reinforcing it. It was a microscopic siege, a silent, desperate struggle between creation and entropy, and the crystal was losing ground. It was a repository of knowledge, not a weapon of war, and its energy reserves were finite. "How long do we have?" Rostova asked, the question hanging heavy in the recycled air. "At this rate, maybe 72 hours before it breaches the reactor containment," Anya replied. "Less if it figures out a faster way through the power conduits. We need to get it off the ship. We need to build the counteragent." The Signan blueprint for the cure was now fully integrated into the Pathfinder's computers, a breathtakingly elegant piece of bioengineering. It required a highly specialized bioforge, a clean environment, and a complex cocktail of organic polymers they simply didn't have. They needed a port, a sanctuary, but every civilized port was a Concordat trap. every Terran outpost a political landmine. Thorn voiced the grim truth. There is nowhere to go. Our best option is to find a habitable but uncharted world, scuttle the ship, and hope a salvage crew finds us in 100 years. No, Rostova said, her voice quiet but firm. She closed her eyes. For a moment, the bridge melted away, replaced by a crystalline map of stars, a chart not of hyperspace lanes but of gravitational currents and cosmic ley lines, a legacy of the Signans. There is one place, a place the Concordat doesn't go, a place built on the principle that laws are for those who can afford them. Her eyes snapped open. Set a course for the Shroud Nebula. We're going to the Sargasso of Ruin. Thorn's face went pale. The Sargasso Eva. That's not a place. It's a legend. A pirate's ghost story. A graveyard of ships run by scavengers and warlords. They'll strip the Pathfinder for parts and sell us to the highest bidder before we even clear the docking clamps. The Concordat thinks the same way, Rostova countered. Which is why they'll never look for us there. And according to this, she tapped the star chart, a gift from a dead race. It's real, and it's our only chance. And limping on failing engines, running on little more than prayer and the crystal's fading energy, the Pathfinder spent 2 agonizing days crossing the void, and the journey ended as they breached the swirling, ionized gases of the Shroud Nebula. Before them, the legend took shape, and the Sargasso of Ruin was a breathtaking, horrifying spectacle. It was a city forged from 1,000 shipwrecks, a tangled, chaotic mass of derelict cruisers, ancient freighters, and skeletal warships, all lashed together by magnetic grapples, crystalline energy umbilicals, and miles of welded steel. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a space station, kilometers across, glowing with the light of 100 different alien technologies, all jury-rigged to work in a semblance of harmony. As they approached, a jagged, repurposed fighter craft, its hull a collage of different insignia, zipped out to meet them, its pilot's voice crackling over the comm. Unidentified vessel, you are approaching the domain of the memory trader. State your name and your tribute. No tribute, no entry, no exceptions. Tribute? Thorn scoffed. We have nothing. Rostova silenced him with a look. This is Captain Rostova of the Terran vessel Pathfinder, she broadcast. We are a survey ship in distress. Our tribute is knowledge. We seek an audience with the one you call the memory trader. There was a pause, then a cynical chuckle. Knowledge, huh? The trader's got more knowledge than she knows what to do with, but she likes novelty. Docking coordinates transmitted. Try anything. We'll vent your hull to the void. Navigating the Sargasso was a nightmare. They were guided through a canyon of dead ships, their docking clamps latching onto a derelict Centauri dreadnought whose spine had been snapped in some long-forgotten war. The air that cycled through the station's umbilical was thick with the smell of ozone, hot metal, and unidentifiable alien spices. Rostova, Thorn, and Anya, clad in environment suits, were escorted by heavily armed scavengers through a maze of corridors, past open-air markets where beings of a dozen species haggled over stolen tech, past bars where grizzled mercenaries drank glowing liquids, their allegiances for sale to the highest bidder. This was the galaxy's forgotten underbelly, a thriving ecosystem of the lost and the lawless. They were brought to the station's heart, a vast chamber carved into the command bridge of an ancient, colossal vessel of unknown design. Wires and data conduits snaked across the floor like vines, all leading to a central throne made from the command chairs of 100 different captains. Seated upon it was a woman who was both more and less than human. Her skin was a patchwork of synthetic grafts, and her eyes were complex cybernetic lenses that whirred softly as they focused on the newcomers. This was Kaylin, the memory trader. "A Terran survey ship," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum, laced with the static of a dozen augments. "A long way from home. The Concordat has put a handsome price on vessels of your class, especially those who play games in quarantine sectors. Then you know why we can't offer you credits," Rostova said, stepping forward. "What we have is more valuable." "Everything is valuable to someone," Kaylin replied, a faint, predatory smile on her lips. "The question is it valuable to me? I trade in secrets, Captain, in data, in the memories of dead men and dead ships. What could a lost little survey crew possibly have that I don't? The memory of a species the Concordat wants you to forget," Rostova said when she looked back at Thorn, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He had hooked a portable interface into the Sargasso's chaotic data network. "On my mark," she whispered. She turned back to Kaylin. "I offer you a demonstration." She closed her eyes, focusing her will, her connection to the seed crystal. Back on the Pathfinder, the crystal pulsed, a single, focused stream of data, a harmless but profound memory, shot across the umbilical for a fraction of a second. The image of the Signan homeworld in its prime, a planet of singing light and crystalline spires, flashed across every screen in Kaylin's throne room. The sensation washed over everyone present, a feeling of perfect, harmonious existence. A peace so profound it was an ache. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Kaylin leaned forward, her cybernetic eyes glowing with an intense, hungry light. The whirring of her lenses was louder now. "What was that?" she breathed. "That was the last song of the Signans." Rostova said, "We carry their legacy, their entire civilization, their science, their art, their history. And the plague that killed them is now eating our ship. We have the cure, but we need a bioforge and the materials to synthesize it. We need your help." Kaylin was silent for a full minute, her augmented eyes processing a million possibilities. "The Concordat doesn't just quarantine plagues," she said slowly. "They quarantine technologies they can't control. Crystalline data storage, gravity manipulation, a nanite plague of that sophistication. This is not a rescue mission. Captain Rostova, this is a treasure hunt." She stood, her presence commanding the cavernous space. "I will give you what you need. My best bioforge, scavenged from a medical research vessel, unlimited access to my organic chemical stores. But my price is not a memory. My price is the seed crystal itself." "No," Rostova said instantly. "That is not negotiable." "Then you can watch your ship dissolve around you," Kaylin countered, her voice turning to ice. "There is another way," Rostova said, her mind racing. "Give us sanctuary. Give us the tools we need. Help us repair our ship. When we are whole, when we have delivered the seed crystal to a place of safety, we will transmit to you the complete scientific database of the Signans. Everything except their cultural and historical memories, their technology, their engineering, schematics for manipulating gravity, for crystalline energy systems, technology a century beyond anything the Concordat has. A gift that would make you a queen, not just a trader." Kaylin stared at her, the gears turning behind her glowing eyes. The offer was audacious, a promise of future payment from a fugitive with no collateral. But the temptation of that technology, it was the kind of power she had built her entire empire to acquire. "You have courage, Captain," Kalen finally said. "And you are a spectacular liar, but your offer is intriguing. Very well, you get your forge, you get your parts, but you will work under my guard, on my station. And if you betray me," she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I will personally peel the knowledge from your minds and sell your empty skulls as curios. Now, get to work. Your ship is still dying." They were given a decommissioned medbay on a derelict hegemony warcruiser, a sterile, cavernous space filled with alien medical equipment that Anya looked upon with a mixture of reverence and glee, while she and her team began the delicate process of synthesizing the anti-nanite agent. Thorn oversaw the Pathfinder's repairs, trading small, non-essential bits of Terran tech for the raw materials they needed from the Sargasso's markets. It was a hive of frantic activity, a race against the clock, but the Blight was racing, too. As Anya calibrated the bioforge, a piercing alarm shrieked from the docking clamp controls. Everyone froze. On a security monitor, they saw it, a thick gray tendril, like a serpent made of living dust, was emerging from the breach in the Pathfinder's hull. It wasn't just spreading anymore, it was reaching. It slithered across the docking tube, its tip probing the air, sensing the energy signature of the bioforge. The Blight knew what they were doing. It was no longer just a plague, it was an intelligence, and it was coming for its cure. The gray tendril, a searching, questing limb of pure entropy, moved with a horrifying liquid grace. It flowed out of the Pathfinder, ignoring the scavengers and guards on the docking gantry who stared in paralyzed horror. Its goal was singular, its intelligence undeniable. It was a hunter, and it had the scent of its prey, the bioforge, the machine that promised its unmaking. Kalen's voice, sharp and laced with a fury that was part fear, part indignation, crackled over the medbay's comm. "Rostova, what is this creature? My station is not a menagerie for your pet apocalypse." "It's the Blight," Rostova yelled back, her eyes fixed on the monitor. "Its adaptive seal, the docking clamp. Sever the umbilical. Negative." A frantic voice from Sargasso Control cut in. "The nanites are already on the clamp mechanism. They're dissolving the seals from the inside. We can't disengage." The situation escalated in seconds. The single tendril became a flood, a river of gray sludge pouring from the wounded Pathfinder, engulfing the docking gantry. Armed guards opened fire with plasma rifles, but the bolts of energy passed through the nanite cloud with little effect. The seething mass absorbing the energy and continuing its inexorable advance. Panic erupted across the Sargasso. Alarms blared, a chaotic symphony of a dozen different alien cultures. In the markets, vendors and mercenaries scattered, their fragile ecosystem of honor among thieves dissolving in the face of an existential threat. This wasn't a Concordat patrol they could bribe or a rival warlord they could fight. This was a force of nature, a gray tide that consumed everything it touched. In the medbay, Anya Sharma worked with a feverish intensity, her hands a blur across the bioforge's controls. "The synthesis is delicate," she shouted over the rising chaos. "It needs a stable power source. All these alarms and power fluctuations are throwing the calibration into chaos. I need more time. Time is a luxury we no longer have," Thorn said grimly, watching the schematic of the Blight's advance. It had overrun the docking sector and was now pushing into the main conduits of the derelict warship they occupied. They were at ground zero. Rostova's mind raced. Sifting through the torrent of Signan knowledge the seed crystal was feeding her. The crystal itself was fighting, its blue energy field extending from the Pathfinder and creating a weak, shimmering barrier at the end of the docking umbilical, slowing the Blight's advance but not stopping it. It was buying them precious minutes. The Signans had never faced the Blight in this aggressive, mobile form. Their knowledge was of its nature as a creeping geological plague, not a sentient, predatory swarm. But buried deep in their scientific archives was theory desperate, untested theory. The nanites communicated. They organized, using a complex quantum frequency. If that frequency could be disrupted, Kalen, Rostova shouted into the comm. I need every broadcast array in the Sargasso, every comm tower, every sensor dish, every long-range transmitter. I need you to point them all at Sector Gamma 7 where we're docked, and blast it with a wide-spectrum EM pulse on my mark. Everything from subsonic to high-frequency gamma, a wall of pure noise. There was a moment of static, then Kalen's incredulous reply. An EM pulse of that magnitude will fry every unshielded system in this quadrant. It'll knock out half my station. You want me to cripple myself? It's better than being consumed, Rostova retorted. The Blight operates on a quantum resonance frequency. If we can flood the area with enough interference, we might be able to disrupt its cohesion, break it apart, even for a few seconds. It's a chance to destroy my life's work, Kalen hissed. But even she could see the gray tide advancing on the station schematics. Her empire of scavenged memories was about to be rendered into the ultimate forgotten artifact. Do it, she finally commanded her station controllers. Reroute all primary power to the broadcast arrays. Prepare for a coordinated, wide-spectrum discharge on the Terran's command. While Kalen's forces scrambled to turn their city of wreckage into a massive sonic cannon, Rostova, Thorn, and the Med Bay security team prepared for a last stand. They sealed the main blast door and barricaded it with heavy diagnostic machines. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the emergency red of the backup power. The only other light was the ethereal blue glow emanating from Anya's bioforge as the synthesis process neared its final, critical stage. Outside, they could hear it, a faint, scraping, slithering sound, punctuated by the groans of dissolving metal. 30 seconds to synthesis, Anya called out, her face illuminated in the machine's glow. The blast door began to buckle inward, the metal glowing cherry red as the nanites worked on it. A fine gray dust began to trickle through the warped seams. It's not going to hold, Thorn yelled, aiming his rifle at the door. Rostova held up a hand. Hold your fire. It will absorb the energy. She looked at Anya. Now, almost. Anya screamed, her eyes locked on a fluctuating energy reading. The final protein sequence won't fold. The power is too unstable. The door gave way with a deafening shriek of torn metal. The gray blight poured into the room, a seething, intelligent wave of dust and liquid metal. It surged towards the bioforge, its one clear objective. The security team fell back, their faces masks of terror. This was it. They had failed. At that moment, from the heart of the Pathfinder, the seed crystal made its final, desperate gambit. It unleashed the totality of its remaining power, not as a shield, but as a song. It was the last symphony of the Signans, the one they had first heard in the Icarus Void. But now it was not a recording. It was alive. It blasted through the Sargasso's comms, through every speaker and receiver, a wave of pure, concentrated memory. For a single, Eternal moment. Every sentient being in the Sargasso, from Kaelin on her throne to the lowest scavenger in the deepest hold, experienced the birth and death of the Signan civilization. They felt the joy of 1,000,000,000 years of crystalline life, and the profound, crushing sorrow of its extinction, and the wave of pure emotion, of pure information, washed over the blight. And the blight, for the first time, hesitated. Its advance slowed. Its form seemed to lose cohesion. Confused by the psychic onslaught of a consciousness it had consumed but never understood. It was a weapon the blight had no defense against empathy. That single moment of hesitation was all Anya needed. "It's stable!" she screamed. The bioforge emitted a high-pitched chime, and a single small canister, filled with a glowing golden liquid, ejected into the collection tray. "Now, Kaelin, now!" Rostova roared into her comm. From 100 different points across the Sargasso, a wave of pure electromagnetic energy erupted, a silent, invisible tsunami of raw static. The wall of noise slammed into the medbay. Unshielded lights exploded. The blight convulsed. Its liquid form destabilized, breaking apart from a cohesive swarm into a disorganized, inert cloud of individual nanites. Thorn, seeing their chance, grabbed a nearby fire suppression hose. "It needs a delivery system," he yelled. He jammed the canister of golden cure into the hose's nozzle and blasted the inert nanite cloud with a high-pressure stream of foam. The golden cure mixed with the foam, blanketing the dust. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The moment the cure made contact with the nanites, a chain reaction occurred. The gray dust flashed with a brilliant, white light and simply ceased to exist. It didn't burn. It didn't dissolve. It was unmade. Its complex structure reverted to its base elements: carbon, silicon, iron, which fell to the floor as a fine, harmless, sterile powder. The cure was not a poison. It was a reset switch. Thorn swept the hose back and forth, cleansing the med bay until all that was left of the terrifying swarm was a thin layer of fine, dark dust on the floor. The immediate threat was gone, but they had used their last resort. The seed crystal, its energy spent, went dark. The hum that had filled the ship, the comforting presence of 1,000,000,000-year-old consciousness, was gone. They were alone again. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of fried circuits. Kaelin's voice, shaken but alive, came over the comm. "Report!" she demanded. "The threat is neutralized," Rostova replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion and loss. "But the seed crystal is dormant. Its energy is gone." "Not entirely." Kaelin's voice was softer now. Different. The shared memory of the Signans had touched her, too. "The song. I still hear it." She paused. "My station is in shambles, Captain, but we are alive. I will honor our deal. The scientific data is mine, as promised. But the crystal and its memories, they belong with you. My technicians are already working to repair your ship, properly this time. The best scavengers in the galaxy are now your personal pit crew. It will get your phase folder back online." "Why?" Rostova asked, surprised by the sudden act of generosity. "Because the Concordat will have registered that EM pulse and that energy release," Kaelin said, her voice turning grim again. "They may not know what happened here, but they know where it happened. A Justicar fleet will be on its way. They will come to sterilize this entire nebula to erase any trace of what they will call a dangerous anomaly. They will come to finish the job they started with the Signans. You didn't just save my station, Captain. You showed this entire nest of vipers what the Concordat is willing to sacrifice in the name of their sterile peace. You gave them something to fight for." She paused. "You have your cure. You have your ship. Now, where will you go?" Rostova looked at the canister in Thorn's hands, then at the fine layer of dust on the floor. They had the cure, but the plague was still out there, consuming an entire sector of space. They had saved a memory, but the species that created it was still dead, and the Concordat was coming, not just for them, but for anyone who now stood with them. "We're going back," Rostova said, a new, terrible resolve hardening in her voice. "We're going back to the Signan Expanse. We didn't come this far just to save a memory. We came to see the future." Their mission was no longer about running or hiding. It was about to become an act of open rebellion. The Sargasso of Ruin, once a monument to galactic decay, became a crucible of frantic creation. Kaylin, the memory trader, was true to her word. Her empire of scavengers became an army of engineers, descending upon the crippled Pathfinder with a focused, desperate energy. They were no longer just pirates and outcasts. The shared memory of the Signan's dying song had ignited something within them, a defiant spark of purpose. They patched the hull not with mismatched alloys, but with reinforced armor stripped from their own capital ships. They fine-tuned the engines, trading chaotic power for a stable, controlled burn. They worked with a reverence that bordered on religious, for the Pathfinder was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol. It was the vessel that had carried a soul through the void and faced down the sterile gods of the galaxy. On the bridge, Rostova, Thorn, and Anya planned their next, seemingly impossible move. The seed crystal was silent, a beautiful, empty vessel in the cargo hold. Its absence was a palpable void, a silence in the heart of the ship that was more deafening than any alarm. They were on their own now, armed only with Terran ingenuity and a canister of golden liquid that held the future of a species. The plan was simple, audacious, and suicidal. They would mass-produce the cure, load it into repurposed atmospheric torpedoes, and return to the Signan homeworld to seed the dead planet, hoping to reverse the blight and give the world a chance to heal itself over millennia. "It's a ghost story," Thorn said, looking at the dead gray planet on the tactical display. "We're trying to resurrect a ghost." "Every civilization starts as a ghost story," Rostova replied, her gaze distant. "A myth of what came before. We're not just delivering a cure, Marcus. We're delivering a new myth." Their work was cut short by the arrival of the law. The Concordat fleet did not announce itself with transmissions or warnings. They simply appeared at the edge of the Shroud Nebula, 20 Justicar-class cruisers dropping out of hyperspace in a single, perfect, terrifying formation. They were a wall of white and silver, radiating an aura of absolute, uncompromising order. Kaylin's voice came over the bridge speakers, devoid of her usual cynical amusement. "They're here, and they brought friends." On the Sargasso's chaotic command deck, Kaylin watched the approaching fleet, a grim smile on her face. "Launch the swarm," she commanded. "Show them what a city of ghosts can do." The Sargasso, the tangled beast of 1,000 shipwrecks, began to fight back. Hangar doors on derelict cruisers groaned open, unleashing a cloud of mismatched, heavily armed fighters. The swarm, scavenged mining vessels with plasma cutters welded to their hulls, lumbered forward next to sleek, stolen racing yachts armed with military-grade torpedoes. It was a fleet of madmen, a chaotic, desperate navy of the dispossessed, and they threw themselves at the perfect formation of the Concordat with a suicidal glee. The battle was a slaughter, but a glorious one. The swarm was a gnat cloud against the might of the Justicar fleet, but they were a persistent, infuriating cloud. They dodged and weaved through the debris field of their own home, using the tangled wreckage as cover. They sacrificed themselves to draw fire, their small ships erupting in silent fireballs to give the Pathfinder precious seconds. It was a battle of order versus chaos, and it was buying them the time they needed. "The phase folder is online," Anya yelled from engineering, her voice a triumphant roar. "But the power conduits are a mess. It'll be the roughest fold we've ever done, and it will almost certainly be our last. Once we jump, this drive is scrap metal." "One last jump is all we need," Rostova said. "Get us out of here." And the Pathfinder, its hull gleaming with new armor, its engines burning a brilliant, steady blue, disengaged from the Sargasso. It was no longer a wounded bird as I thought, but an avenging phoenix. As it pulled away, the Justicar commander, recognizing its primary target, broke formation and surged forward. But Kaylin had one last gift. She overloaded the core of the ancient dreadnought that served as the Sargasso's spine, unleashing a focused, directional blast of raw energy, a makeshift solar flare. The blast washed over the lead Justicar, its shields flaring violently, its advance momentarily halted. It was the window. "Anya, fold us," Rostova commanded. The universe broke. The final phase fold was a violent, uncontrolled tear in reality. The bridge crew was slammed against their restraints as the ship was twisted through dimensions, the bulkheads groaning as if they were being ripped apart at a molecular level. Then, with a final, bone-jarring shudder, they were through. They were back where it all began. Before them hung the Signan homeworld, a silent, gray sphere of cosmic dust, a tombstone floating in the void. The quiet was profound, a galaxy away from the chaotic battle they had just left behind. They had made it, but they were not alone. A single point of light resolved behind them, the lead Justicar. Its hull scorched from Kaylin's energy blast, but its purpose undiminished, had weathered the storm and followed them through the chaotic wake of their fold. The Justicar's serene, synthesized voice filled the bridge one last time. "Terran vessel, your rebellion is at an end. Your defiance has only proven the necessity of the pact. Look at the chaos you have sown. A battle rages at the edge of civilized space. A plague has been weaponized. You have not saved anyone. You have only spread your own disease of chaos." "You call it chaos," Rostova replied, her voice broadcasting across the void, her eyes fixed on the dead world before them. "We call it life. It's messy and it's unpredictable. It doesn't follow your perfect equations. You say you curate the galaxy, but a garden full of headstones is not a garden. It's a graveyard. You're not shepherds. You're undertakers." She turned to the tactical officer. "Launch the torpedoes." From the Pathfinder's belly, a dozen torpedoes, their warheads replaced with canisters of the golden cure, shot towards the gray planet. They didn't explode. They dispersed, streaking through the upper atmosphere, releasing their contents in long, shimmering veils of golden mist that rained down on the dead continents below. The Justicar watched, its cannon silent. It could have destroyed the Pathfinder a dozen times over, but its commander was paralyzed by a force it couldn't comprehend: curiosity. It needed to see the outcome of this illogical, emotional, human act. For a long time, nothing happened. The golden mist settled, and the planet remained a sphere of silent, gray dust. The Justicar's voice returned, tinged with something that might have been synthetic pity. "Your hope was misplaced. Your interference was meaningless. But then it began. A low hum, almost imperceptible at first, emanated from the planet's surface. It was a single, pure note. On the bridge, the dormant seed crystal in the cargo bay began to glow, a faint, soft blue light resonating with the sound. On the planet below, a change was occurring. The cure wasn't just a reset switch, it was a catalyst. It was breaking down the blight. Yes, but it was also providing the base organic compounds the world needed to begin again. The gray dust, now sterile and harmless, was becoming a fertile soil. And from that soil, something new was growing. A single, tiny point of crystalline light appeared on the surface. Then another, and another. A network of light spread across the continents, like a nervous system coming back online. The planet was singing again. It wasn't the grand symphony of the old civilization, but a new song, a simpler song, a song of rebirth. The Justicar remained silent, its perfect logic shattered by the impossible sight before it. It had come to enforce a conclusion, and instead, it was witnessing a genesis. It had no protocol for this. Without another word, the Concordat cruiser turned and vanished into the silent black of hyperspace, leaving the Pathfinder alone with the miracle it had wrought. In the weeks that followed, the Pathfinder stood vigil as the Signan homeworld continued to heal. Ships began to arrive, not Concordat warships, but the battered, mismatched vessels from the Sargasso of ruin. Kalen's swarm came not as scavengers by a way, but as pilgrims, bringing supplies, engineers and amis, and a fierce, newfound sense of loyalty. They formed a protective perimeter around the nascent world, a ragged fleet of guardians for a newborn god. Humanity had not started a war, not really. They had started a conversation. They had challenged the galaxy's oldest law, not with weapons, but with a stubborn, reckless act of hope. Eva Rostova stood on the observation deck, looking down at the world of singing crystal, its light growing stronger every day. The void between stars was still filled with laws, old and unforgiving. But now, thanks to a crew of stubborn humans on a broken survey ship, it was also filled with a choice. And that choice, messy and chaotic and beautiful, had changed everything.